I know exactly who that is. That's the mother that loses every game. That's Kirk Cousins. Then get rid of him.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the reveal of the number 12 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Minnesota Vikings. And we have, in this episode, the first guest in the series. And I kid you not, this was one of the most fun football conversations I've ever had with Arif Hasan, who covers the Vikings over for The Athletic. And that conversation carries a lot of weight. Arif is super informative to a lot of the stuff I normally talk about in these deep dives. So if I don't spend a lot of time on a guy throughout the first part of this episode, it's because we go even deeper than normal in my conversation with Arif. So things will look a little bit differently here than my other ones, but I hope you guys enjoy. And if you do, please do hit that like button. Please do subscribe and turn on notifications down below so you do not miss an upload as we count down to the number one team in my power rankings throughout the summer. And also, I do need to remind you guys that tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, I am kicking off a 24-hour charity stream raising money for the Special Olympics and for March of Dimes. I have an announcement video for that up as well. Make sure you check that out. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for that. Set your notifications. It is going to be insane. But let's just go ahead and get started and talk about this team's offseason because it was a busy one here in Minnesota. And I don't know if people truly realize how good of an offseason the Minnesota Vikings had, both in free agency and the draft. So as you look at their key departures, Gary Kubiak is going to retire, but that was something they had really set a plan in place for as his son Clint is going to step in. So that should be a pretty seamless transition. They do lose Kyle Rudolph, who has really just been a role player for this team as of late. A very replaceable spot there, if you ask me. Riley Reif at tackle is a starter that they lose, but they go ahead and draft Christian Darrisaw, by most considered a steal in the first round. And then Anthony Harris is a key departure in the secondary there. But they've been busy in the secondary as they don't just add Xavier Woods to hopefully replace Anthony Harris there, but also a couple of veteran corners, Patrick Peterson and Brashad Breeland. We know Mike Zimmer loves himself some veterans there in the secondary, but also massive improvements on the defensive line that was horrendous last year, as you're going to see Michael Pierce returning this year after signing a Sais free agent contract. He's going to come back from the opt-out this year. They also add Dalvin Tomlinson. So the pay grade on that interior defensive line is you also see Sheldon Richardson, more of a pass rush focus there coming in. Man, massive dollars being dished out there at that interior defensive line. And then Danielle Hunter, one of the more underrated premium edge players in the league, is coming back and looks to be healthy, as Arif, spoiler alert, alludes to. But let's go ahead and get into the rest of this roster. We're going to jump position by position group and rank each group how they stack up against the rest of the league, starting with a very average, normal, call it boring conversation about Kirk Cousins, who ranks 15th in the league. Another player that Arif details here. I'm not going to say that about every player here, but again, that interview, I'm just telling you, stick around. It's worth it. Lots of great intel there. But Kirk Cousins is a very textbook, average, good NFL quarterback. Very to the book. Kind of know what you're getting week by week, unless you get those weeks where you go against defenses that can really get after them. You have seen sometimes when the Vikings do run into great pass rushes against their so-so offensive line over the last few years that if Kirk doesn't have time to read the defense and get through his progressions, there's only so much he can do. But he even has, at times, some underrated athleticism. He will pick up first downs with his legs. He is the butt of a lot of jokes here for Minnesota. There was a video recently about a woman in Minnesota that was just pissed just seeing a picture of Kirk Cousins that was going viral. He gets a lot of crap, and he is a good NFL quarterback. They rank 15th for me. He's one of these guys that if everything's perfect, he can be what Jared Goff was for the Rams or Jimmy Garoppolo for the 49ers, where you can maybe make a Super Bowl run. But his contract is pretty damn big and does at times make that a little difficult on the Vikings to build the roster that they need around him. So we're all pretty familiar with Kirk Cousins. If you think he sucks, he doesn't. He's perfectly fine. He's perfectly average. Now, they do go ahead and draft Kellen Mond here in the 3rd round, who most people considered to be a really good pick. And I certainly like the process of this draft selection because, whether he works out or not is almost irrelevant based on a value perspective because they really maximized value in this draft. They moved down with the Jets, getting this 3rd round pick that they used on Kellen Mond for free, and they ended up drafting Christian Darrisaw, who frankly they probably could have or should have just taken with the original pick. So they get this 3rd round pick for free, which gives them a free dart throw at a quarterback with great athleticism and a strong arm, and by all reports, really high character and a guy that has that desire to be great. That said, he is to me a total project. I don't know what Chris Sims was on when he put him 4th on his quarterback list. Frankly, before that came out, and before I kind of got bullied into bumping him up my draft board, I thought he was a day 3 project. I'm not going to say I'm a believer in Kellen Mond, but I do think that's exactly the type of dart throw you want to take, and he's in a great situation to kind of sit and develop here for a couple of years. So it's going to be multiple years here until we get any idea on if Kellen Mond can play. Right now, I'm not so sure. You also have Nate Stanley and Jake Browning. So we'll see how that all plays out. Based on some of the stuff Arif said in our interview about Kellen Mond, there's no guarantee that Kellen Mond wins that backup job. So again, ranking 15th at quarterback, and not going to make or break their team, which is kind of better than some teams can say at that quarterback position. Now we get to the running back. This team has a really nice running game, really outstanding 1-2 punch with Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. I do think Dalvin Cook can be in the conversation for the best running back in the NFL. I do think Derrick Henry is the best runner of the football, but you mix in how Dalvin is really not far behind him just on a running the ball perspective, whether it's vision, speed, ability to break tackles and make guys miss. But Dalvin is actually relevant in the receiving game, which you can't really say about Derrick Henry and oftentimes Nick Chubb. And I think those 3 guys are the best runners of the football in the league. So I do think Dalvin should be right in that conversation. He has had some more health issues than some of those other guys. He is a guy that does and will get banged up. But yeah, I love Dalvin. He is such an explosive player. He is a rare difference-making type of running back because of his ability to rip off those chunk runs. There's tons of Alexander Madisons of the world. There's tons of backs that can take advantage of good blocking, maybe break a tackle here or there, and be good runners. But it's another thing where you can hit gaps that maybe weren't there to begin with and have the speed to really run away from defensive backs, and Dalvin Cook's got it. So I love me Dalvin Cook. That's why they rank 3rd, but Madison is a really nice backup. On certain run schemes, you can't tell a huge difference between these guys. If they're in more crowded areas, he's got the dreads and they're about the same size. So he is a really nice complement, brings a nice power aspect to the running game, and can help keep Dalvin healthy as well and take a good 25% of the carries there, or come in and just be the full starter when they do get into blowouts and just can basically let Dalvin rest. You got Amir Abdullah, who's that traditional speed threat. If he got an opportunity in this scheme, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually looked relatively productive. They go draft Kene Nwangu as well, so they have some of that home run threat speed on the bench. If anything happens to Dalvin, you have Madison carry the load, and you hopefully can get some home runs from one of those 2 backs. And Nwangu is super, just alien-esque as far as his athletic testing numbers, but never really put it to the field and produced with the crazy athleticism that he does have. So hoping to maybe hone in something for him and maybe something clicks from his vision, but just basically a dart throw at athleticism there. So 3rd for running back, we also have a relevant fullback alert with CJ Ham, who's one of the relevant fullbacks in the league, and just got to mention him because otherwise Vikings fans are going to be mad at me. Let's go ahead and move on to the receiving grade here. They are going to get inside the top 10 with their receiving grade here, as they have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, one of the top receiving duos in the NFL. Justin Jefferson bursted onto the scene last year, the best rookie wide receiver, and I think it's almost commonplace for people to say CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. Eventually, those guys were better prospects. They're eventually going to pass up Justin Jefferson. I'm not so sure. I of course, had those guys above Justin Jefferson, but Jefferson was still a true first-round talent. And the way that he's shown to fit in this scheme is a truly authentic, high-end scheme fit here. The way he accelerates and can get open in those deep crossers that we see on play action in this Shanahan-inspired offense, he has the ideal route running ability and the ability to have craftiness to stem some of those looks into disguised corner routes, and he can run those posts as well. So he really fits the route tree that they ask him to run. He's got some of the more surefire hands, as he did coming out of LSU. We showed him again as a rookie, so you feel extremely good about his hands and ability to go win contested balls. On top of that, his run after the catch that is always valued in these Shanahan schemes to the likes of A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel. He really has it all. And for Justin Jefferson, I do think he can and will continue to climb to the point where he will be in those top 10 receiver conversations that right now, with the amount of good receivers in the NFL, he's probably not there quite yet, but man, hard to say he won't be by the end of the year. And then to have Adam Thielen as your number 2, he might even be slept on a little bit here. Adam Thielen has, to me, the best ball tracking ability of any receiver I've seen this decade other than Antonio Brown. He has a rare trait to see the ball in, paired with the size to brush off the subtle kind of pass interference that you see that just doesn't get called. So as he's got defenders draping all over him, often out of balance because Adam Thielen just beat him on a shake route, or with shake in his route. But he's able to basically brush off contact, track the ball in, and make some of the more beautiful contested catches that you'll see. Very unique trait there from Adam Thielen. He has extremely reliable hands. He has good wiggle in short areas, which makes him a great red zone threat. He's a run blocker. So maybe not even enough respect for Adam Thielen. So many great receivers in the NFL right now, but he should still be in that top 15, top 20 convo. So you have one of the top receiver duos in the NFL, and they're both great scheme fits as well. And then they just picked up D.D. Westbrook. They did me a favor and made this move before the deep dive. I was waiting on someone to pick up D.D. because he definitely has value in the NFL. As a third option here, if he stays healthy, he is going to be someone defenses have to account for on big dropbacks, 3rd and 8, all that stuff. The Vikings do run a lot of 12 personnel here, so it's not like he's going to be on the field constantly, but he is an upgrade to B.C. Johnson and doesn't force you to lean on a Ihmir Smith-Marsette, who I wasn't quite as high on coming out. So D.D. should be a good route runner, a guy that can create separation and be an upgrade from what they had at that wide receiver 3 spot last year. Really nice pickup, and I could see him exceeding my 71 grade on him as well. BC, not a bad comp to D.D., just not quite as explosive. So BC Johnson is a 4th wide receiver. Could prove to be okay there. You got a slot guy in Chad Beebe, whatever. Now, Ihmir Smith-Marsette as a late-round pick here, I had him actually on my not my guys list. I thought he was a 6th, 7th round prospect, a guy that you maybe throw a dart throw at on speed, and he is a good kick returner here, but I thought Blake Prohl, who they picked up as an undrafted free agent, was a significantly better player, a better route winner, a better ball winner, and just all around a better receiver, whereas Smith-Marsette was the quote-unquote better athlete, but Blake Prohl is a sneaky good athlete. He's not Austin Prohl. He's not a typical slot receiver, so keep an eye on Blake Prohl. I personally had him 11 spots higher on my wide receiver board than Ihmir Smith-Marsette, 22nd for Prohl and 33rd for Ihmir Smith-Marsette. You got KJ Osborne. He'll have to compete for a spot here, and then they also have Whop Phillier out of Indiana. Was a gadget player down there, but honestly on tape looked really slow, and then he came out and ran a pretty poor 40 time. So he's got some shiftiness, but probably not going to make the team, but some people liked him. So there's your receiving room, and then you have the tight ends. A lot of people projecting a breakout year for Irv Smith with the departure of Kyle Rudolph. Personally, I think Irv Smith is really good. I don't know if I see a breakout season. He to me is in that sort of Gerald Everett, Jonnu Smith mold of tight end, 6'3", really athletic, can run away from guys, good run blocker for a guy that size. Now, yes, he'll technically get a slight increase in his snap count, but let's be honest, he was still a full-time starter for them last year they run a ton of 12 personnel here. So it's not like his opportunities are going to shoot through the moon. And I don't know. I just think he's going to repeat similar to what he did last year. I do like Irv Smith. And I would just say the fact that a team like Minnesota has Irv Smith is enough to boost them ahead of the Tennessee Titans, who we just did, who actually have a very similar looking receiving core. And the other reason for that is what we said about Dalvin Cook in the receiving game, as opposed to the Titans, who have Derrick Henry, who can't run a route. But let's wrap up the tight end group here. You have Tyler Conklin, who's just kind of a typical backup tight end, tough dude, blocker type. Zach Davidson, intriguing day 3 pick, uber athletic small school prospect, someone that is probably going to have to sit and develop here, but kind of showed some flashes of Jimmy Graham with his ability to win in the red zone, his leaping ability, and some of that speed in space. So just keep an eye on Zach Davidson, good guy to kind of pick up for deeper dynasty fantasy football leagues. So it's really not the best depth in this tight end group, but I do think Conklin can step in and play that Kyle Rudolph blocking role for this offensive line, I suppose, and frankly might even be a better run blocker than Kyle Rudolph ever was. And then, the running backs, Dalvin Cook's a good receiving back. You probably wish he would have developed a little bit more in his route running and show some more reliable hands, but he still does contribute at a decent level in the receiving game. Just his athleticism and ability with the ball in his hands alone just makes him such a threat, especially in the screen game too. So he's more than good. Like I said, I think the combo of Irv Smith and Dalvin Cook is what gives them a slight nod ahead of the Tennessee Titans, even though the duo of Julio and A.J. Brown is a little bit better. I'm only bringing that up because we just did the Titans and they were 10th, but and it's like the same offense. I just found it interesting. But anyway, you got Alexander Madison, who's okay as a receiving back. Amir Abdullah has actually shown later in his career to be a decent third down back. So some decent options in the receiving game for the running backs there. Again, ranking 9th in the league. This is a really nice group. This was one of the 10 best offenses in the NFL last year. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook, their ability in the receiving game paired with Kirk Cousins, who is a good quarterback, it's almost slept on at times here in Minnesota. And now we got the offensive line, which has been a hot topic in Minnesota for years and years and years. And you look across the board here, man, they have invested in this group. Exactly what Vikings fans have wanted. You go across the board, you got a first-round pick, Darrisaw, second-round pick, Ezra Cleveland, first-round pick, Garrett Bradbury, third-round pick this year, Wyatt Davis, and a second-round pick in Brian O'Neill, all within the last 5 years. So with that, you're going to get some youth, you're going to get some unknowns here, and frankly, we're not even sure that Wyatt Davis starts this year as a rookie there. But a group with a ton of athletic potential, and this is a group that I think actually can play really well off of each other, especially as they have a young Clint Kubiak. This wide zone Shanahan offense is not going anywhere, and have almost inarguably the most athletic tackle duo other than maybe San Francisco with McGlinchey and Trent Williams. Now with Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. If you want to talk about wide zone blockers that can get on the move in space and bury linebackers and safeties, man, it's hard to pick a better duo than that. And then you have Ezra Cleveland and Garrett Bradbury, same thing, ultra-athletic guys. And then you add maybe a little bit more meat inside with Wyatt Davis, as we've seen Garrett Bradbury really get overwhelmed by the Kenny Clarks and Akeem Hicks in this division. So it's a perfect scheme fit with this offensive line, which carries a lot of weight, pun unintended, as we're talking about O-line here. But a little bit more time on each player individually. Christian Darrisaw at left tackle, such an excellent draft selection. To move down and get him where they did, I couldn't believe some teams passed on Christian Darrisaw. Teams like the Colts, for example, a team like the Raiders who took a second-round tackle prospect instead. But yeah, just a steal for the Vikings. I doubt they've thought that they were going to be able to get Darrisaw. They were probably looking at this tackle class and said, we're happy with other options. Figuring they wouldn't be able to get him. But man, it worked out. He is a Trent Williams-esque athlete at the tackle position. Not quite the prospect Trent was coming out, but like I said, as far as scheme fit and athleticism and potential, he is up there. He thoroughly enjoys his role as a run blocker. Now, he does have a lot of development to show as a pass protector. I would actually compare him in a lot of ways to Andrew Thomas as well. who I did say coming out, despite being my number one tackle last year, I did say he's going to need some time to really learn traditional pass sets that Georgia didn't actually run a ton of. Same thing with Christian Darrisaw. So it is going to be a learning curve for him, and there's a chance that he's not this huge strength in the rookie season, but such a great pick. You have Ezra Cleveland at guard, who actually looked pretty good there. They kind of played him in an emergency and basically were forced to just kind of plug him in there at guard. And now my worries about having to do that, I had said that, teams sometimes when they slide a guy inside to guard, they just say, oh, well, he's good at guard. We don't need to play him at tackle, even though tackle is the more valuable position. Blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter now because you have O'Neal and Darrisaw. So you can look now at Cleveland at guard. And also on top of that, I was worried about putting him next to Bradbury with how thin this offensive line was looking. But I think getting Darrisaw, getting Wyatt Davis, you are getting a little bit more meat in there, and you're not so worried about how he'll get overwhelmed. And his athleticism for this wide zone run block game in year 2, he could actually be a really nice guard here for them. And he doesn't have to be their best lineman. He can be their 4th best guy here, and that's saying a lot. So the upside's already looking nice. And now Garrett Bradbury, I almost feel like he's just been lacking a nice group of guards around him to truly thrive because he is tiny, right? If he ends up one-on-one or if he's not getting great help from that guard, we all knew it coming out. If he goes against Kenny Clark, he goes against Akeem Hicks, which he has to see 4 times a year, yeah, no shit, he's going to get bulldozed. He's 295 pounds and never had a great anchor coming out. That's not his game. He's a great run blocker. He can get on the move, very much a young Jason Kelsey. So, yeah, he's struggled as a pass protector, but if he gets more help around him, I do think he can look like a better pass protector, and those run block grades will start to creep up as well if other players play well around him. So I do like Garrett Bradbury, but he has struggled. So we'll see what he looks like. And then the right guard is going to be a total open competition. Wyatt Davis, I never understood the first round hype on him. It's almost like sometimes with these mock drafts and stuff, someone just puts him in the first round early on enough, and then everyone just jumps to the conclusion, oh, Wyatt Davis, first round guard out of Ohio State, makes sense, top guard in this class, yada yada, and then he just gets locked in there throughout the rest of mock draft process. But he, to me, he was a late second, early third round prospect, right around where they got him, so it was decent value for him. And it's not like they have great guards here either. So he, in theory, should win this job. But I don't see him as a lock to be a long-time starter. I think he has upside, absolutely. But he has a lot to prove, and he's got to win this job just to begin with. There was a lot of times where he was just letting guys run right past him. I think the blitz recognition is an issue for Wyatt Davis, and just some of his technique in general does have some work to go. But as a run blocker, he's a beast. He can get off on the move and has that mentality you look for from a nasty run blocker, and certainly the athletic traits as well. So a good pick in the 3rd round. We'll see if he can win that job out. And then Brian O'Neill, saving the best for last year. Really like Brian O'Neill. Reminds me of a young Lane Johnson, right tackle for the Eagles, who was just that uber athletic, former quarterback. Brian O'Neill here, a former tight end. Just high character guy, works on that technique and pairs with that athleticism, beefs up a little bit throughout his career. Brian O'Neill, to me, is on the same career trajectory, although not an early first-round pick like Lane Johnson was. But I think O'Neill, due for a contract here very soon, should be bargaining as if he's going to be in that top right tackle conversation, even up there with a Ryan Ramczyk. Even though he hasn't produced at that level quite yet, I think he's ascending to that level. He's getting better year after year. And then you have some pretty poor depth. You have Rashad Hill, who played okay last year, I guess. You're hoping that Wyatt Davis wins that right guard spot because Hill, Udo, Dozier, even a Mason Cole, who they bring in from Arizona, all these guys will be in the mix here. Drew Samia as well, 4th-round pick several years ago. So they've been kind of throwing some darts, and you hope someone emerges as a right guard here. Hopefully having the rest of these guys fill in and be more stable, you can focus more on who's specifically the right guard as opposed to who's playing at left tackle, who's playing at left guard, who's playing at right guard, constantly shuffling these guys around. O-line's been a mess here for the Vikings for a long time. And I don't think it's going to be amazing this year. They do still rank 21st. But they have a really nice plan in place, and I think by the end of the year and as we get into next year, we can start to look at this as a really nice high upside group that's going to grow together and is going to get there eventually, assuming the coaching can be right. So that offensive line is certainly a question mark here, as it tends to be. But overall, they are going to rank 14th on offense. Part of that's the Kirk Cousins factor. Part of it is the offensive line not being unreal. Part of it's just there's a lot of really good quarterbacks with great receiving cores in the NFL right now, but it is a very good offense, a top half offense. It is a scheme that, just like the Titans, when that scheme is working, it looks really good. But as we've seen with the Vikings, when they get off script, just like we said about the Titans with this Shanahan offense, they don't have a ton of great counterpunches, and part of that is Kirk Cousins in those more expected pass situations just isn't creating a ton. So there are limitations to this offense, but there is also a severely explosive aspect of this team as well. And of course, they run that Shanahan wide zone offense here in Minnesota, and not expecting a change with Clint Kubiak coming in. So now let's turn over to this defense that Mike Zimmer is praying he doesn't have to go through what he went through last year, as this was one of the worst defenses in the NFL by the end of the season. Very uncharacteristic for this team. But let's start with the run defense that is going to be just by default better. Just starting up front, Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson, the money that they're spending on that duo up front, it better be a better run defense. But Michael Pierce, who opted out last year, coming in here, he is one of the best run-defending nose tackles in the NFL. So that's a tone setter up front. That gives you a nice baseline to go off of there. And then Dalvin next to him, also one of the best run-defending nose tackles in the league. So, man, it's unfortunate that the best offenses in the NFC, Rams, Niners, Packers, they run wide zone offenses. So I don't know what two nose tackles necessarily does for you there, but against most teams in the league, it's going to be pretty damn tough to get past those two. So good starting point there. You're going to have Sheldon Richardson probably kind of getting in the mix on later downs, more of a pass rusher, always has been, than a run defender, but he can still defend the run. Armon Watts, not a bad fourth defensive tackle. Some prospects behind him there with Lynch and Scott. Scott was a decent nose tackle at Oregon, undrafted pickup there. We'll see if he makes the team. So the interior duo there is spectacular against the run. You go to the edge, Danielle Hunter, he gets the 82 grade. That's, he is developed as a run defender throughout his career. And, I think if he's back healthy and he looks like he did at the end of 2019, he's going to exceed the 82 run defense grade I give him. He is just a freak among freaks at that edge position, and he's continuing to develop his game in that feel as, he was a raw guy coming out, and he hasn't been a full-time starter for the extent of his career here in Minnesota. So Danielle Hunter, very good defending the run on that other edge spot. Stephen Weatherly is just a jack of all trades, master of none, really rotational kind of backup defensive end that's going to be asked to kind of play a starting role at least early on this year. But you got some bigger body dudes with some explosiveness there. DJ Wanham, Jalen Holmes, Patrick Jones, and Janarius Robinson. These guys all have a lot of potential to take this starting job and develop throughout this offseason and frankly become good run defenders on the edge. They are really hoping just one of these dart throws for these kind of raw athletic edge guys hits, and then you get a quality number two there. And then for the linebackers, really nice group. I think what they bring to the table in coverage, especially with Eric Kendricks, is much more significant than as run defenders. Kendricks is a lighter dude. He doesn't always get off blocks, but he is instinctive, and he's developed as far as his tackling consistency goes. So he is still a very good run defender. We'll obviously talk more about him in coverage later. Anthony Barr, big-bodied dude, but not always the most instinctive player. So kind of the opposite of Eric Kendricks. If only you could mold those two guys into one player. And then Nick Vigil, I think probably starts there as the second linebacker. Just the guy with the experience there. Zimmer tends to like that. It's the third linebacker. But you got some prospects there. Surratt, Dye, kind of competing and trying to get in the mix there. I would not be the least bit surprised if either Dye or Surratt beat out Nick Vigil. Just we'll see how that plays out. So they do rank 9th for run defense for this upcoming season. They were one of the worst run defenses in the NFL last year. And look no further than Alvin Kamara breaking the rushing touchdown record on him on Christmas. But, you look at all these guys returning with Pierce, Tomlinson, Barr, and Hunter all coming back. And this home field that's one of the best in the league. They should be right back to the top of run defense. And then the pass rush, this was also a major struggle for this team. They had quite possibly the worst pass rush in the NFL last year. Danielle Hunter goes down, Yannick Ngakoue comes in for a second, and then he's gone. They had nothing on the interior. It was hard to watch. They just couldn't get after the quarterback, and it hurt the defensive backs as well. Well, getting Danielle Hunter back is a nice step in that direction. He is a monster. He, frankly, is underrated at this point in time. I do think he is a top 10 edge rusher. I do think he is an alpha edge rusher, and could be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate coming back from the injury. It is just a matter of the health for him, and does he, I think he is healthy now, but does it stay? It was a back issue, and that kind of stuff. It is a little scary, so does it come back? That could be a question mark with Danielle Hunter, but getting him in here alone takes it into the top 20. Now, they don't have a whole lot after that. Pierce and Tomlinson are okay rushing the passers. They're somewhat functional relative to most nose tackles, right? They do have strong arms. They do have length and power and discipline, but they aren't like flying off the ball, right? They don't have elite bull rushes or the quickness to stem together multiple pass rush moves. Both these guys kind of lumped together as traditional nose tackle types. You're going to get something from them. You're going to get probably 25 pressures from Pierce, maybe 30 from Tomlinson, so that's not terrible. It's just nothing exciting. You also have Sheldon Richardson, who you fully expect to kind of relieve these guys in a big rotation, especially as you get later into the downs. So that's nice. He's their second best pass rusher, and I think that was a necessary addition for this team who just didn't have a good number 2 pass rusher. So that was a good addition for them. Now, the other edge spot is the massive question. My gut actually tells me that we're going to get Wanham or Holmes or Jones or Robinson, one of those 4, to emerge as like a decent number 2 rusher here. I just can't really tell you who it's going to be. That is kind of out of my power to predict that. It's just a matter of who puts in the work in the offseason, who gets their body in shape, and who puts the time in the film room to develop that technique. Because they're all kind of in the same group of prospects, just athletic, raw, toolsy guys. But for now, it's Stephen Weatherly, who's coming back after a really rough year in Carolina last year, totally lost that job by the end of it and was a total non-factor for that defense. Was better the year before here in Minnesota, so returning to that scheme, you picture he can be a factor, but really not contributing much on that other side. So it's going to be a lot of double teams thrown Danielle Hunter's way, and you're just hoping someone else can step up there. And they're going to rank 19th for now, and exceeding that is going to truly depend on a breakout from a Wanham or a Holmes or a Jones or a Robinson. And, Wanham wasn't terrible last year, and I should also mention like James Lynch on the interior, Armin Watts. They're also decent young prospects, but just it's a matter of playing time for those guys right there. But let's go ahead and move on to the linebacker grade, and I finally get to talk about Eric Kendricks. It's almost been a TFG drinking game at this point to take a drink every time I say this guy covers players, not grass, at the linebacker position. But Eric Kendricks plays football the way I want to see a linebacker play. He is so instinctive and smart, and he's developed what he can in run defense, but he just, you can tell, he puts in time in the film room, and he has a true understanding of what opposing offenses are trying to do. When he sees that play action, he's so natural at knowing what kind of concepts are coming behind him, and he'll flip around and he'll take away that tight end sneaking across the field, or he'll help out with that receiver coming across. He just doesn't fall for stuff, and he's aggressive in coverage as well. So athletic in space. There's nothing not to like in Eric Kendricks' game. And I do think he's the most valuable linebacker in the NFL. It's something I talk about with Arif. He gets really in-depth and supports what I was just saying there. So Eric Kendricks, not just one of the more underrated linebackers, not the most underrated player on this team. He is one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL, and he is the reason they rank second here. But you also have Anthony Barr, who is a more than competent number 2 linebacker. Plays nicely with Eric Kendricks. Like I said, I wish you could put Eric Kendricks' mind in Anthony Barr's body, because then you're talking about a linebacker that could rival Aaron Donald for the best defensive player ever. But he is an edge rusher that is asked to play linebacker, and you see that show up. He doesn't play with a ton of instincts and a ton of zone coverage IQ, and he does lack some, quickness in space. He's not a great man cover linebacker. He does bring, however, great blitzing ability, thumping ability, and excellent speed, pursuit, and tackling in space ability. So pairing that with Kendricks is a nice compliment, and certainly the other reason they're ranked second. And then you're going to have a competition here. They bring in Nick Vigil, who is very Eric Wilson-esque, who stepped up and played okay for them last year. He's just a decent kind of cover-ish, balanced good athlete type, but not a true starter. And then they draft Chaz Surratt in the 3rd round, another player with good instincts and a former quarterback that does see the game similarly to the way Eric Kendricks plays, but still in a lot of ways learning that position. Wasn't always the best run defender, and not the most explosive athlete either, but I could see him working out here and at worst becoming the starter next to Eric Kendricks, because Anthony Barr probably in his last year here. We also have Troy Dye, who's an athletic, almost safety-looking linebacker with some coverage skills and some length as well. So they have a really good linebacker room, and they put a lot of emphasis on these guys playing well. You also have some decent backups behind them. Ryan Connolly and Cameron Smith can play, and Tuff Borland, a good run defender coming out of Ohio State. So really good, deep linebacking group. Definitely the deepest linebacking group in the NFL. But now let's move on to the secondary here. And Arif covers this group really well, so pardon me if I gloss over this a little bit. But they bring in Patrick Peterson, who looked slow last year. There's really no way around it, but he still is serviceable and probably would have been this team's best cornerback last year, which is saying a lot because Patrick Peterson was not great for the Cards last year. But they gave him a lot of money, change of scenery, better coaching. I think Patrick Peterson will be just fine this year. He's just a guy that's not going to be out of position a ton, will be able to play all of the different coverages that Zimmer likes to implement. So I think he has a decent year, just not a great year. And then you're going to have a competition for the cornerback 2 spot. Cameron Dantzler was a 3rd-round pick last year, like Kevin Durant-esque as far as his build, just like super absurdly skinny. But that length and quickness shows up in his coverage. But I like the Brashad Breeland signing to kind of hedge your bets, because Cam Dantzler is not a sure thing. He's going to have to win that job after showing some nice flashes last year. It's a lot of hype and anticipation for Cam Dantzler. His top speed's not the best, and I think there's a chance that he does disappoint a little bit in coverage this year. But that's why it's nice you have Brashad Breeland there as just the perfect insurance plan that they got for cheap. He's been a quality starting corner for the Chiefs and the Packers over the last few years. So great signing there just to ensure Cam Dantzler. Now, I said Cam Dantzler has a chance to disappoint. I don't really think that happens. I like Cam Dantzler, and I think in year 2 here with a better pass rush in front of him, he could become this team's Xavier Rhodes as like a really quality number, let's just say quality starting corner. I always thought Xavier was a little overrated, but obviously if Cam Dantzler had a similar career, you're not going to complain about that. So, and then Jeff Gladney dealing with a legal situation right now, so we'll see if he's out there. It's either him or Mackenzie Alexander. That's going to be another competition, but it's another situation where you hope Jeff Gladney in year 2, who had a lot more downs than ups in his rookie year, but was certainly thrown to the fire playing behind that pass rush, changing to slot corner where he played outside in college. So the combo of getting to the NFL, changing scheme, or at least changing position, frankly, and playing behind one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL did not help him for the former first-round pick. You want to think that they would give him the opportunity over a Mackenzie Alexander, but I do think Mackenzie Alexander is currently the better player. So that's another interesting slot corner position battle. But you're probably emerging with 3 decent starters. And if it ends up being the 3 veterans there with Peterson, Breland, and Alexander, again, it's going to be better than what they had last year, even if that's not the high upside group there. The rest of the backups here don't get me all that excited. You got Harrison Hand, who's kind of a hybrid defender. Chris Boyd, quick-footed man cover guy who just doesn't really have the top speed to be a great corner. And then just, honestly, just some practice squad talent there. The safeties, you have Harrison Smith starting to slow down a little bit for sure, but still a very high-end starter, if not an elite player still. But yeah, you've got him kind of moving all over the place, calling out the shots for this defense, and if nothing else, his IQ and playmaking instincts and leadership, it is gonna elevate this stuff. But he's still a good zone corner and can blitz and play good run defense. So he is still a great asset for this team, even if he's not what he used to be. You got Xavier Woods there, who was a good signing. I think he can give you what Anthony Harris gave you. Harris graded out really well there for a couple years, but a really big down year last year, kind of came back to earth, and they finally let him go. Xavier Woods is a very similar player. He's got some of those man coverage abilities that Anthony Harris showed. He's got good ball skills. He's got some range up top. I wouldn't be surprised if Xavier Woods has his best year here in Minnesota, just as Anthony Harris has played well. So I thought that was a nice little sneaky signing. And they seem to be pretty comfortable with Xavier Woods there because these other safeties are just not good. You have Josh Metellus, who's a box safety and a 6th-round pick last year. Don't want to see him on the field. And then Cam Bynum, they spent a 4th-round pick on him. Now, he's listed at safety right now. Maybe he could be corner depth, but I think he makes this team as a safety. And if Xavier Woods really sucks, you hope Cam Bynum can fill in and convert from corner to safety quickly. I do like the conversion project. I think Bynum's got some size and physicality and was a really smart player at Cal. Just that top speed kind of hurt his ability to be a top corner prospect. But they seem to have a plan for him in place, and I wouldn't be stunned if he turns into a player, but difficult to project that. They ranked 19th in the secondary, which is an upgrade from last year, but needless to say, they have some pretty sizable questions as well. I think the big thing here is the floor has been raised. They have insurance plans in place, they have veterans, and hopefully can just get quality play here and not look lost like they did for the majority of last season. So the defense as a whole ranks 8th for me, which is pretty optimistic. I think they get back towards that top-level defense. You can see they rank tied for 3rd for home field as well. It is an epic home field advantage. It is one of the loudest in the league, and it's a team that really buys into that pass rush at home when they get rocking. That Gallo they play, it hits you in the feels. So that helps, I think, getting home field back next year. Hurt this defense last year and is going to help them this year. And defensive coaching, too. You got Mike Zimmer, who's still one of the premium defensive minds in the NFL. Yeah, they had a down year last year, but Zimmer's been coaching great defenses for a long time, and I don't see that changing. He is even a little underrated as a head coach because of what happened here last year. And, I think they might have enough holes to say they probably won't have that elite championship caliber defense. That game-wrecking defense that just straight up wins games for this team, especially in the playoffs. But it's not like their offense sucks, right? They rank 14th on offense. So you have a good offense and a borderline great defense. That is a formula for winning a lot of football games and making some noise in the playoffs. So a recap of the team before we get into their schedule and my win total predictions for this team. 14th on the offense and 8th for the defense, but they are going to rank 27th on special teams. Oof. The kicker situation here has been bad for a long time. Kicking is kind of a cuss word in Minnesota, but Greg Joseph, Riley Patterson out of Memphis going to compete for that kicker job. It's not like it was good last year, but man, this team has been looking for a kicker for a long time, since like Ryan Longwell left. So that's a huge red flag there, is the kicking woes for this team potentially showing back up and costing this team some critical points there. They lost to the Bucs last year really because of the missed kicks. And then the culture is good here for the Vikes. I would just leave it at that. It ranks 16th. It's it's a good culture. It's not going to pop you in the face and be like, oh my God, everyone they draft hits and They're always clicking together. They're just kind of middle of the road as far as earning the benefit of the doubt, I would say. And then the strengths and weaknesses. This team has a lot of strengths that I'm not sure they get credit for. The run game is elite with potentially even improved run blocking this year. You got the scheme works, and obviously Dalvin Cook and Madison there. You have an elite wide receiver duo, one of the best in the league. Very difficult to game plan for that group. The scheme is sound and proven and reliable and established and all that stuff. The defensive coaching, Mike Zimmer is one of the more adaptive coordinators in the league. He can really mix up his coverages and hit you in a lot of different ways. He's also really good at knowing what kinds of players he wants for his scheme, and hopefully getting some more talent on that side of the ball. It starts to show back up this year. And then the run defense should be a strength for this team, especially up the middle. Now, when they go against some of those wide zone offenses, we'll see. That's when you're looking at Anthony Barr coming back, hopefully helping to contain the sideline-to-sideline stuff. And then middle of the field coverage is awesome here with Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks. It's not a better, I would say, coverage duo on those hook zones over the middle of the field when they go that route with their coverage. Weaknesses for this team, it's dynamism at quarterback. You're just not getting a lot of playmaking there. You really have to have the scheme available to them. But when it's open, when you block for Kirk Cousins, when you scheme guys open, he's accurate. He can step into throws, and he's very textbook in that way. So you do lack some explosiveness and playmaking at quarterback. And then number 2 pass rusher is a potential weakness here. Like, even on the interior, teams are probably going to be able to double team Danielle Hunter and can do a good job to neutralize this pass rush. They're really leaning on somebody else to step up here, whether it's Richardson going back to peak Sheldon Richardson or one of those edge guys to emerge. You have unknowns at cornerback. I think the floor is okay, but I think their floor is like 24th in the league, and I don't know how much higher their ceiling is at corner. So that is up in the air. And then kicker. Is our game's going to be lost here for the Vikings because of their kicker? History would say yes for the Vikings. So let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule. It's not a particularly easy schedule as they start with 2 road games there against 2 of the top quarterbacks, top young quarterbacks in the league. I think they split that, Cincinnati and Arizona, and then Seattle and Cleveland at home. Oof, that's one of the harder starts we've seen. So I've got them going 2-2. At least you have the 2 harder games there at home. That home opener against Seattle is going to be fun, and I'm actually going to be at that Cleveland game. And then Detroit at home, so you should be able to pick up a win there, and at Carolina. So getting a little bit better there, get the bye week. And then down the stretch, I basically have them rotating wins and losses for a few weeks there, and then you have a tough stretch at the very end of the year. The last 5 games of the season, that offensive line better get whipped into shape. That young group, you hope, can show some development throughout the season because you have really the top pass rushes in the league on your schedule. Pittsburgh ranking number 2 there after the Melvin Ingram signing. We got Chicago, who's up in the top 3. The Rams are going to be very high. Green Bay will be very high. Those are some of the best pass rushes in the NFL, and that interior group's going to be tested with the Akeem Hicks, the Kenny Clark, the Aaron Donald, and Cam Hayward. I mean, my God, that is not a favorable matchup for the Vikings. So I would say, to be real here, if that offensive line can whip into shape by the end of the year, that might make or break if this team can make the playoffs, because I have them, losing 3 of those 5 games, and that could be the difference here. So not the best matchups for them down the stretch, and it leads them, for me, going 9-8, which is a no-bet prediction here for the Vikings, as their over-under is 9 wins. I'm a little bit higher on this Vikings team as a whole. It's tough to say a team with Kirk Cousins at the helm and some question marks on defense can be a Super Bowl contender, and that might be a stretch. I do like the upside of this team overall, though. I think they can have a top 10 offense. They can have a top 10 defense, and that is a recipe to make some noise in the playoffs. But how much do I trust Kirk Cousins? How much do I trust this team's track record, really, of developing the O-line and getting a kicker that can make big kicks at the end of games? Those are things for the Vikes that I think would bode against them. But in general, I don't think Vikings fans can be too upset with this. Ranking 12th, and a lot of people were expecting the Vikings to come in earlier. So let me know in the comments down below, guys, what you think of this ranking. And we are now going to transition to the interview with Arif Hasan. It's a ton of fun. Please stick around, guys. It is so insightful with some good banter back and forth. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy the video as well. Make sure you hit that like button if you did, and we'll see you for the next one. And now I am super excited to welcome Arif Hasan onto the channel. Arif covers the Vikings for The Athletic and is also just an A+ follow on Twitter. It's at Arif Hasan NFL. For the people with the Bird app, I definitely suggest checking him out. So how's it going, neighbor? Thanks for taking the time to come on today.
Hey, man. Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, so the Vikings have been a little bit busy this offseason. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the defense and all the big moves on that side of the ball. I can't not help but think about Zimmer. I think it was after the Saints game, and he was just like, I think he quoted, he was like, "This is the worst defense I've ever had." And he was, I think, came into the offseason and was like, "That is never going to happen again. I am going to load this thing up. And I'm not going to have any excuses." So I'm just kind of curious, like, what you thought of the different moves they made. Do you think it was enough for really getting back to the kind of, I think we're both in agreement, they need to have kind of that championship style defense if they're going to win the Super Bowl. So do you think, what do you think of the moves? And do you think this could get back to those old Vikings defenses, or maybe not?
I think, like, in aggregate, taken all together, I think this is largely, pretty good, right? Like, I think that having, additional defensive linemen, really good to see that over last year. Obviously, having a couple players come back, like Michael Pierce, Daniel Hunter, that's going to help supplement it. And then, of course, changing, that secondary, just generally speaking, probably, not going to make too many mistakes doing that. So overall, I think in aggregate, it's pretty good. If you take a look at it in terms of like value for money, or if you take a look at it kind of individually, I've got some quibbles, right? Like, I think they paid too much for Patrick Peterson, but like a fairly substantial amount.
Yeah.
I didn't love like the Dalvin Tomlinson move. Like, I think that he is a remarkably good player. I think that it is tough to find a better 4-3 nose tackle. Like, there are a couple, right? But there's not many. So he's a really good player to have. But when you take a look at the construction of the Vikings defense, or you take a look at kind of what they might need to do, I don't love it, because I think Dalvin Tomlinson, for example, is not as talented as a 3 technique. I think that he really shines as a nose tackle. The Vikings already have a nose tackle in Michael Pierce, who they didn't have last year, but they'll have this year as a result of the COVID-19 opt-out. So, there's some areas where I just feel like the Vikings made a misstep here or there. But yeah, I think for the most part, I think that they ended up doing a pretty decent job, improving over last year. I don't really think that this is like a top 5 defense, which is, I think, the assumption that Zimmer might be making going in. And that's kind of a problem. But I think that there's every possibility that they can return to kind of top 10 contention as a defense. So, how much more money do you want to spend on being a top 5 or versus a top 10 defense? I think that's an interesting question. We'll see if they, get there anyway. But yeah, for the most part, I like it. But there's just, some stuff here or there that I just have some issues with.
Yeah, totally. I have them 8th. So I think that I agree. Like, they can get into that more than competent defense to the point where, like I just did the Titans, and I look at them fairly similarly, but the Vikings defense, I think, is going to be much better than the Titans. So that means there's just less pressure on the offense. So I am very optimistic for the Vikings. Where do you think what do you think about the cornerback room? I know you mentioned Patrick Peterson. He's obviously going to be slotting in there as a starter. And then I was just kind of looking at it, and it seems you got some pretty interesting competitions there. So I'm curious who you think wins outside there, probably between Dantzler and Breland. Mm-hmm. And then in the slot, they bring back Mackenzie Alexander, who's probably going to compete with Mike Hughes, or not Mike Hughes. He's gone.
He's gone.
Jeff Gladney. So do you think those are the two competitions?
No, that's all correct. I think that it's tough to figure out who's going to win between Breland and Dantzler. And I think that's a good thing. I think that just kind of handing the job to Dantzler because he had like 4 good games at the end of last year. It's probably like, I would understand that instinct, but I'm glad that they didn't kind of follow through on it. I'm glad that there's kind of a move to make sure that whatever you have at the other outside corner spot is something that, is substantially better, right, than just kind of, assuming that your default is going to work out. So yeah, and they could even do a 4 cornerback rotation, right, which they did a couple of years ago when they had Trey Waynes, Terrence Newman, and Mackenzie Alexander, right? So they had Xavier Rhodes, he's definitely going to start. He's fine. And then between the other 2 positions, you had 3 corners that would see the field a fairly large amount of the time. Like you didn't end up having like 2 out of those 3 that ended up taking so many snaps that you kind of knew who was who, right? So, and that ended up working out for them. Obviously, Terrence Newman, as an older corner, ended up having to take a lot fewer snaps. Mackenzie Alexander had to develop a lot faster. Trey Waynes had to develop a little bit. But I think for the most part, that did end up working out for them, which, yeah, I didn't expect at the beginning of the year. I thought that was going to be kind of messy. So it is possible, but I do think that they want somebody to win that job. So, whether or not that's Dance or Breland, I don't know. But if forced to guess, I would say Dancer probably wins that outside corner job, and then you just end up with like really good cornerback depth. And then on the inside, Mackenzie Alexander, I think just, with Jeff Gladney's legal situation, it doesn't sound like the victim is going to recant their statement or anything like that. I guess I don't know what the grand jury decided. They met earlier today as of this recording on the 29th. So we'll see if they kind of move forward with the indictment. But if the victim decides to kind of keep moving things forward, I think the Vikings are just going to be like, well, we got a slot corner, so we don't really have to worry about this. We'll let this kind of play out by itself. If things look good for Jeff Gladney from a legal perspective, and it's between him and Mackenzie Alexander, I would still imagine that Mackenzie Alexander wins that job, just because he's an adequate nickel corner, right? Like Gladney, I don't want to overstate the case that he was bad last year, but he didn't like make it very clear that he should, have the nickel corner job. So and Alexander is just fine. He's not an amazing nickel corner, but he's a starting quality nickel corner, and he knows the system. So he's been there throughout the offseason and camp, which is more than you could say for Gladney, for fairly obvious reasons. So I think that the Vikings are just going to kind of rely on the idea that, Alexander is a more than sufficient player for that spot.
Yeah. Well, and Zimmer will at least be happy that he's not forced to play rookie corners, as we know he hates with a passion. So at least there's that. And yeah, I feel like Gladney, just maybe a little bit of a scheme, mismatch there. I feel like he was so good in that kind of quarters off zone at TCU, which he's not really getting that, especially in the slot. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the Vikings corner situation is one of the more interesting groups. So thanks for going through that. And then the last question on the defense: are you as stupid high on Eric Kendricks as I am? I would go as far as saying he's the most valuable linebacker in the NFL because of the style. The style he plays with, especially in the modern NFL, where teams attack the middle of the field the way they do. He quite literally forces teams to adjust the way they're used to attacking because of how good he is at recognizing that first option over the middle and really going after it. Phrase I always use is covers players, not grass, in zone coverage. And that's really the way he plays. So would you agree with that statement that he is the most valuable linebacker in the NFL?
Most valuable. I like that. Yeah. I think the way that the Vikings play defense and design their defense uniquely enables linebacker value in ways that are probably not true in a lot of other defenses. So if you take a look at like the studies on like wins above replacement or whatever, linebackers are really low on the list, right?
Right.
That's not really true for the Vikings. I think that, I was kind of playing around with some of the on-off splits, and I was kind of asking PFF about kind of, hey, Kendrick seems kind of a little bit different when you look at it from this angle. And the last look I had about some of the early wins above replacement stuff that they had, which the model might have changed entirely since then. It was a while back, but Kendricks was just up there. Like he was just really high on the list. So I think that he just happens to be on a team where linebackers are worth more. And then also, I think he's unequivocally a top 5 linebacker. There's no question about that. And I think that, he's in contention to be kind of one of the, if not the top linebacker. And when you combine kind of just the fact that he's in a position where his value is just kind of put to the roof just by the nature of the defense and his pure talent, I think that he might be the most valuable linebacker in the NFL, especially because I keep saying the way the Vikings do it, and it's because the way that the linebackers are really critical to that third down package, and the way that that defense orients itself around making sure the linebackers can cover the most typical responses to what they do on third down. Because if they walk those linebackers up to the line of scrimmage, most teams will either do one of two things: they'll either throw a screen pass, or they'll throw a receiver quickly over the middle to get rid of the ball quickly, right? And to have somebody with the athleticism of a Kendricks or a Barr, but Kendricks is better, right? To have somebody with the athleticism of one of those to be able to shut down that screen pass from the position of the A gap. It's so rare for a linebacker to be able to do that, to be able to shut down that screen pass or take away that option over the middle without blitzing, or putting pressure on as a talented blitzer. That's tough, and that's one of the reasons that the Vikings have consistently had, even last year, after having such a terrible defense, they were still one of the top third down defenses in the league. And people talk a lot about like volatility on defenses is such a big thing for PFF. Like defenses don't, translate their performance from year to year. But the Vikings have had a top 5 red zone defense and a top 5 third down defense since 2015, every single year. And a top big 5? Part of it, the top 5. Yeah.
That's
so
really
if you take
impressive.
a look at touchdown conversion rate in the red zone, or if you take a look at just conversion rate on third down, they're the only team that remains top 5 year after year after year. So even when they have a bad defense, that particular situational defense is something that they do really well. And it's really critical that the linebacker is a big part of that. So when Eric Kendricks got injured last year, for the last 5 games of the season, that defense, which was turning around after just a really rough first 4 or 5 games, they started doing better and better. Then Kendricks gets hurt, and suddenly they're like the number 30 defense again.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was just so clear what a different defense they were when Anthony Barr got hurt, and that hurt them a lot. That changed the defense, and that sucked, right, in terms of their ability to create defensive performance. But when Kendricks got hurt, it was just a completely different defense. And Kendricks doesn't even wear the green dot. He doesn't do the defensive calls. That's Anthony Barr. But when that defense was missing Eric Kendricks, it was night and day. It stopped their, if you believe in momentum, it stopped their momentum cold in terms of being able to generate at least a league-wide average performance. They couldn't even do that without him on the field. So yeah, I think most valuable linebacker for sure.
I'm really holding back from throwing shade at Darius Leonard, as you mentioned, the green dot not necessarily mattering, because that's always the case with Darius Leonard is leadership. But I'm going to hold back and definitely not mention that, and definitely not trigger any Colts fans.
I wouldn't dream of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Kendricks is a beast, man. That's some good stuff you brought up there. So I want to transition a little bit to the draft. I got to shout out you putting together that consensus draft board again. It's a great resource, so keep at it. I was honored to be a part of it this year. And what did you think of the Vikings draft? I loved it. Like, I thought they just got value down the board and hit needs too. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the top half of the draft, aside from like Chess, didn't love that pick personally, but the top half of the draft, I thought that they really nailed it. The back half of the draft, there's some individual picks I like. Jalen Twyman, I think, is really an example of a pick that I thought they did a really good job kind of identifying value. And if your concern is the back half of the draft, then you're probably not that concerned about the draft, which is exactly how I feel. I think that, you reach for Kenan Nwangu. Who cares? Good job. You reach for Kenan Nwangu,
Sure.
right? But yeah, Christian Darrisaw, fantastic value. Kellen Mond, pretty good value. Although now that I'm seeing him in camp, I don't know. So far, first couple of days in camp has been real rough.
My next question's about Mond, so we can get into that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that, for the most part, they did a pretty good job, matching positional need and kind of value against the board overall. I think that this was kind of one of the cases where the consensus board grade on the Vikings was just kind of low on them, because the amount that they reached on day 3 was just so big that it was tough for them to, if you take a look at consensus board value after round 3, they were a top 5 team. And so they just kept on grabbing guys that were outside of the top 300 in the second half of the draft, and it just kind of tanked their value. So they ended up having an average draft overall by consensus board value. Which, okay, fine, whatever. There were some opportunities that they could have had, I guess, which they missed. But personally, I like Amir Smith-Marset. I think that he's a really intriguing receiver, so I don't really mind that they reached there.
So he was a reach for the consensus board.
I think so. If I remember correctly, there was, they make so many friggin' picks every year. I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
who's a reach and who's not. But
I was actually going to ask you about that because I felt like I was really battling against the grain on Amir Smith-Marset before the draft. So I would have guessed that consensus board was higher on him, but maybe it was just a loud minority that really liked him.
It's tough because the receivers the past couple of years, everyone's high on every friggin' receiver.
Yeah.
And so when you have the tough task of rank ordering these guys and ending up deciding, honestly, I think he's my 20th receiver, but I really like him. Right. I don't like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And the receiver talent has been astronomical, right? So you're just going to end up in that situation. But yeah, if you're like 20th ranked receiver goes 12th, then you say you really like
I'm a Packers fan. You don't have to rub that in.
Amari Rodgers is pretty good, right?
I like Rodgers, yeah. But it took 3 years to draft a slot receiver. Like, come on. We could have gotten this over with 3 years ago with Renfro out in Las Vegas. We could have gotten it done years ago.
Right. I think the thing that really hurts has to be before the draft, Rodgers named 3 receivers that he liked, or after the draft, he named 3 receivers that he liked before the draft, and all 3 of those receivers turned in like these
really good players.
Years. Yeah, like I really like that kid from Arizona State and that Clemson kid and that LSU kid, and it's like, wow, you named like 3 of the top 5 rookie receivers. Yep. So that's the part that would really sting for me, hypothetically, I guess.
It's even like the Darnell Mooney's of the world that hurt me. I was screaming for him like round 3, round 4. It's like, come on, what are we doing? Drafting a 3rd offensive tackle. Anyway, we're here to talk about the other NFC North team.
Right, yeah. But no, I like Amir Smith-Marset. I don't think he'll have an impact this year, which is fine. He doesn't have to. But a kick return asset, his speed is really nice. He's got the basic physical tools to into a pretty good route runner. So I like it, but it's one of those situations where because of the way that you have to rank things in the consensus board, and you're probably not going to put your 20th ranked receiver as like your 40th best guy or whatever. It ends up looking like a reach, but people don't really object to it, right? So it's just kind of one of those things. But Twyman, I think, was a value by the board, and I think that was probably about it for their day 3 values. I think the rest of them, they didn't like the Patrick Jones or the Jarius Robinson pick. The thing about the consensus board is like it doesn't know, for example, that like say Rashad Weaver was under investigation, right? We didn't know that until after the draft. And so
you get a couple of those every year.
Yeah, it's like, oh well, you got the wrong edge rusher out of Pitt, and then 4 weeks later, you're like, I don't know, did you? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one of those things. I kind of like Patrick Jones. I don't think that he'll contribute this year, which is fine. I don't really know if I like Janarius Robinson that much, but you get a couple of edge rushers, one of them hits, it's fine. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I feel about the draft. I think the top half of the draft, you end up with some pretty good players. The bottom half of the draft, I individually like the players, but I can see why, from a value perspective, they didn't kind of check all the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you throw a couple darts at edge athleticism, as they like to do. Yeah. And then you pair that as another dart with Wanham, and then you bring back what's his name as the starter there, and hopefully the veteran that they had from a year ago.
Stephen Weatherly?
Yeah, Weatherly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you hope you get some kind of competent number 2 edge play this year.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Kellen Mond for a second. I was doing some projects, still working part-time for PFF, and I was doing some stuff and brought me back to Kellen Mond, and I'm like, geez, I kind of got bullied into moving him up my draft board because he wasn't originally on my top 10 quarterbacks.
Oh, and then top 10.
Yeah, he wasn't originally on my top 10 when I made my video back in like January, because that's the first position I do. And then I feel like I kind of got bullied into it, where it's like, whatever, it's not, QB7, QB8, it's not worth my time to like fight the cause of like me being a Kellen Mond hater. So I'm like, sure, I'll bump him up over Ian Book. Who cares? So I really thought he was a, day 3 project type. And then all of a sudden, he's QB4 for Chris Sims, and all the hype starts to generate.
Yeah. Chris Sims. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just kind of looking back at him a little bit removed from the draft process, I said like lots of stuff I didn't like just from his A&M tape whether it was just reading defenses or accuracy, I was like, oh man, I don't know. He's got a lot of work to do. And yeah, that plays into my next question about like, you've been out at camp these last few days, right?
Yeah. So 2 days of camp, and then I also saw him, all throughout the spring and mini camp and OTAs and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what are you seeing in Mod specifically?
I want to be fair and not use really inflammatory language, but it's not good, man. It's he's struggling so far. I always want to leave open the possibility that he'll get a lot better. Plus he's a rookie. There's all kinds of things where a player might be doing some things or might be in a position where, suddenly things turn around or they're doing this on purpose or whatever, right? Like Aaron Rodgers always throws a couple of picks at camp and you're like,
right.
Yeah, that's the point, right? I don't really think that's where Kellen Mond is. Like, I think that he has accuracy problems. So the stuff that you don't like watching Kellen Mond, Texas A&M, like God, you got a guy open deep, probably should throw it to him, and he doesn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's still there. But the stuff that you do like, right? Like, wow, he's really willing to challenge tight windows, throw it over the middle. He's got, this rocket arm that he's willing to kind of use for that purpose. And he's generally pretty accurate over the middle. At least short over the middle. That's not there, right? Like he's willing to challenge the tight windows, but the accuracy just isn't there. And it's maybe like he needs the timing down and he just doesn't have that yet. I don't know, but like he's overthrowing guys a lot over the middle right now. The timing seems to be off kind of. And I feel bad because it's like, I'm not pulling for or against Jameer Smith-Marset. I've got kind of my own favorite little wide receiver like I want Blake Prohl to really blow up this year, right?
Okay, we're gonna talk about Blake Prohl. Hell yes.
That's great.
I can't believe you just brought him up.
I always find like some skill position player that I'm like irrationally, excited about, and this year it's Blake Prohl. But I'm not like, yeah, Amir Smith-Marset, what an awful pick. My takes will be good if he plays poorly. It's not like that or anything like that. But I feel bad for him now because I feel like he's not getting the opportunities he needs to really shine because Mond is just like not giving him those opportunities with like these pretty poor passes. Now he had a Twitter clip just went around like yesterday for Amir Smith-Marset winning a deep ball with Kellen Mond throwing it. And like good for Smith-Marset, but Kellen Mond would have been sacked on the play because he was taking way too long to throw the ball.
Gotcha.
And so great deep pass. The only real highlight for him, and it turns out it should have been a sack, and he should have gotten rid of the ball. And the rest of camp has just been pretty bad for him, which, he's a rookie third round pick. He's not expected to start, etc. I'm not like going to say that it's a bad pick, right? That a bad draft pick because some guy is doing really poorly in camp in a year he's not even supposed to start. But, the Kellen Mond era is off to a rocky start.
I think the saving grace there is it was a total house money pick because they had traded down. Yeah, they got that pick for moving down. They ended up getting the guy at 24 that they probably were going to take at 14 anyway, or wherever the draft pick was. So it's like, okay, you get a random dart throw. If he doesn't work, who cares? He got 2 years to develop. And
it's a quarterback. Are you going to take a dart throw in any position? Quarterback is a really fantastic way to do it.
And it's a perfect scenario because you've got good core. You've got Kirk in front of him. He's got time. Plenty of time to figure it out, and the process was A+, even if the prospect isn't. So, and I think it was the guy to take with the upside or whatever. So,
yeah, and it's some of the like I don't love Davis Mills or anything like that. Like some of the guys picked around him at quarterback. Like, okay, yeah, fine.
So, guess where Blake Prohl was on my draft board?
Let's say among receivers, I will say. 18th,
22.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Close enough.
Yeah. So I thought
pretty high on him then.
I was super high on him. I didn't get a ton of tape from him. I couldn't find a lot of ECU, but yeah, dude, I didn't get why there was no talk about him at all. I was stunned that he didn't get drafted. I thought he was way better than Amir Smith-Marset, just as a route runner, as a ball winner, a junior coming out, just all of it. Like, I love the way he attacks the football.
I didn't get turned on to him until after the Vikings signed him, and I watched him so I could write a scouting report on him after the fact. And I was like, I don't know, man. This guy probably should have been drafted.
Yeah,
he's a really like the 6th and 7th rounds of the draft this year, which all the GMs were saying too. So it's not like I'm just saying this out of nowhere. It's a really thin draft, right? And so the 6th and 7th rounds were just full of players that a typical year would just not be drafted. And I'm just like, I don't know, if I could have had like Blake Prohl over some of those guys, I would have. I was surprised. I'm with you. He seems like a pretty good player to me. And like you take a look at some of these guys that are like really good route runners, and like the thing is they're not really great athletes. And it's like, I don't know, he might be a better athlete than like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got drafted off of his route running.
100%.
So like,
I didn't think
really
the gap between him and I like Diami Brown a lot too, but their play styles are very similar.
Yeah.
So
which you wouldn't think it looking at Diami Brown play, and then you see kind of Blake, but yeah, they're pretty similar in terms of play style.
I almost wonder if it's because his brother was like the typical white slot receiver, and they're like, oh, Blake
with a family connection.
Yeah,
name and
it's like, oh, he's just another whatever slot guy, but that's literally not what he plays. He's a perimeter.
Yeah, and people are kind of expecting like a Chad Beebe, right? And it's like, not really, man.
No,
first he can catch the ball.
Let's give him he's a lot more Adam Thielen if you want to go that route.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. No, that's perfect. Yeah, no, for sure. Like Brandon Zylstra, when he came in, the Vikings as an undrafted free agent before obviously the Panthers ended up picking him up. He got compared to Adam Thielen because he's a white receiver who's an undrafted free agent. You don't really see it, right? Because he's a contested catch guy. Mm-hmm. Chad Beebe, same thing, but Chad Beebe is like 5'7" and Adam Thielen 6 feet, right? Like it's just they're not this, but like Blake Prohl, you could do it, right, without kind of relying on tropes. Like there's a similarity there that makes sense.
Definitely. Cool. I'm glad I'm not alone on the Blake Prohl love. I'm hoping he doesn't make the team, and Aaron Rodgers said, hey, I kind of like that Blake Prohl guy. Now that you're asking me my opinion,
he's 3 for 3 on scouting wide receivers. Although I guess we'll have to see how Randall Cobb does this year.
We're still waiting to hear how Jake Kumarow's career pans out too.
I'm excited for the Aaron Rodgers GM era. This is going to be
it's going to be great. I'm pumped. All right. So I have just a little mini game here that I came up with before having you on here. So I'm just going to give you a player, and I want you to give me the first 3 words that come to your mind, just traits, first 3 traits that come to your mind when I say these players. Sure. So Justin Jefferson.
Explosive, which is, given his athletic profile, is not really something you'd come up with. Explosive. I don't know, savvy. Yeah. Explosive, savvy, and surprising. And by that, I mean, his skill set does not really match what you'd expect for somebody with his like athletic testing, or even sometimes what you'd expect given his film as LSU. Really great contested catch guy, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, explosive, savvy, surprising.
I think I was going like acceleration, lengthy, and like gritty. What's the other one? Which, of course,
in multiple ways. Yeah. Gritty.
Yeah. All right, Kirk.
Consistent, boring, and ideal, actually. And which is not to say he's like the best quarterback, but if I'm coaching a high school quarterback, Kirk Cousins tape, putting that on, I would refuse to like give them Aaron Rodgers tape, right? I don't want my high school quarterback to learn how to play quarterback from Aaron Rodgers. If he ends up playing like Aaron Rodgers, obviously I'm ecstatic, right? He's the best quarterback in the NFL, or second behind Patrick Mahomes. But like, if I'm putting on teaching tape, like I want him to replicate the mechanics that Kirk Cousins has. I want him to replicate the field reads that Cousins has. Just like in terms of textbook quarterback stuff, Cousins is great. But he's also consistent, which is both a positive and a negative. He plays exactly the same in the 2-minute drill as he does, in the 4-minute drill, which that's not ideal. I think I just chose ideal, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like he's a textbook quarterback in all the good and bad ways.
Yeah. I like that description of him. Brian O'Neill.
Great, which is just, I can't believe I just chose that one, but great. Such like a meaningless descriptor, but great. Athletic.
Yep.
Hugely athletic. And smart, I think. He plays really intelligently. Like when he figures out kind of how he wants to attack an edge rusher, he knows exactly where he wants to put his hands, right? So if you've got an athlete who knows exactly what they want to do with their body and how to block or how to defend or how to attack an opponent and how to use leverage, I mean, you're in a really good spot. Like, he's not the top right tackle in the NFL, but he is putting himself in a position where he's going to end up in that conversation, which is great.
He's totally on the Lane Johnson career
Exactly.
trajectory. Like, he's like, just reminds me so much of young Lane Johnson.
Yeah. And Lane Johnson is such an obscenely good athlete that it's kind of weird to talk about another tackle in that context. And I wouldn't say that Brian O'Neill is the same athlete, but he's such a good athlete that you could put him kind of on the same track for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of good athletes, Danielle Hunter.
Oh God. Monster.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where I'm one of those guys that's just like, I kind of hate using the word monster or freak to describe like real actual people. Yeah. But monster, savvy, again, another word I want to use, and instinctive. And I was going to almost use the word fluid there. But like, he plays the game so naturally that there's actually Zimmer told this story today, and it's just so perfect. So Danielle Hunter and Brian O'Neill are playing against each other, and or in a drill, and Hunter just absolutely whips the crap out. I don't know if I can swear.
Go for it.
Whips the shit out of Brian O'Neill, right? And Brian O'Neill is about to get paid mondo money, and he deserves it, right? And Danielle Hunter just whips the shit out of him, and Brian O'Neill's like, "What did you do?" And Danielle Hunter's like, "I don't know. I have no idea." And that's exactly it. Like, he knows. I shouldn't say he knows, right? Because he doesn't, right? But he's got such a great feeling for what's going to work and what's not going to work that his body kind of reacts like he was put on this earth to play edge rusher. Like, he's not the best edge rusher on the planet yet. but he was kind of purpose built for it, and so his body kind of knows exactly what it needs to do before he knows what he needs to do in order to do the stuff that needs to be done at the position, whether it's to rush the passer or to stop the run or whatever, right? We had 3 pressers today, as of this recording, to the 29th. We had 3 pressers where all 3 of the and they were all players in this case. All 3 of the players ended up having to talk about Danielle Hunter for one reason or the other. And they all took up, like, the pause I took, right, when you said Danielle Hunter, they took the exact same pause, and they were just like, man, that dude, like, have you seen him? Is like how they're reacting to him, right? Like, Patrick Peterson is like, yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a better athlete in my life. Right? Dude's been around for a while. He's like, yeah, he reminds me of a young Javon Curse, whose nickname was like literally the Freak, right? Like, he's like, yeah, man, I don't know. I've seen a lot of really great pass rushers in my career, and I don't know if I've ever seen a better athlete in my life. Right? And all 3 of the players were just had to pause and just be like, man, I don't, like, is he the same species as me? This is nuts.
So needless to say, he's looking healthy.
Yeah. Like, we asked Mike Zimmer's like, do you think that he's kind of ready? And he's like, well, if he's not ready, I can't imagine what it's going to look like when he is ready. Like, Mike Zimmer doesn't praise players a ton, and he was just like, yeah, I was flabbergasted at it. Like, he almost turned into like a poet trying to describe how he felt about Danielle Hunter today. It was kind of wild.
You're making me want to sneak in some. Well, you're making me want to like put in some defensive player of the year bets, because
I saw a tweet today that was just like, "Hey, man, what is he, plus 4,000 to make defensive player of the year?"
Oh my god, I'm gonna do
this
right now while I'm recording. Like, yeah, I mean, you see, like, Brian Burns, Chase Young get all the hype. There's no reason Danielle Hunter shouldn't.
If I could choose between Brian Burns and Danielle Hunter for defensive player of the year, 100% I'm taking Danielle Hunter. I love,
well, especially because the Vikings defense is going to be a lot better.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
So
you're going to be he's going to be in a good spot to kind of assert, especially because you can even crack, because these awards are so narrative driven, right? And so you can easily craft
the comeback and
exactly. And without him, the defense was 29th, and with him, the defense is like 8th or whatever.
Yes.
And like, you get to ignore all the other stuff that they did defensively. Whatever. It doesn't matter.
you almost need the narrative if you're going to dethrone Aaron Donald too. Like you
Right,
need that
and
extra.
so that's the second part is that there's going to be voter fatigue, right? For because he won it 3 years in a row, right? Deservedly, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, he probably is going to deserve it a fourth year, but no one's going to want to vote.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying. You need the narrative. You need the extra
Yeah.
incentive for people. Yeah.
Aaron Donald, he gets to play with Jalen Ramsey. That's not fair. Hunter, he's out here with a washed up Patrick Peterson.
You see the looks that Jalen Ramsey does to help Aaron Donald? Obviously.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever come out of a training camp presser seeing as much hype for a player as I have today with Danielle Hunter.
All right, that's awesome. So Harrison Smith.
Savvy. I'm going to use that word again. Declining. 3 years ago, I think you had a good case to be the best safety in the NFL.
Yeah,
not really the case anymore. And essential. So there you go. Yeah, savvy, declining, but still essential. He is not the athlete he used to be, so you can't really ask him to do like crazy Earl Thomas middle of the field, weird cover three where your cornerbacks just don't have to do. And this is not a knock on Richard Sherman, who I thought was the best cornerback in the NFL for a while, but they just don't have as much ground to cover because of Earl Thomas, right? You can't really do that with Harrison Smith anymore, which you could earlier. But he's still a really phenomenal pass rusher. He's still an incredible big brain safety, all kinds of wrinkles in his brain. Really good at adjusting a defense, really good at freelancing. Like one of the things that Troy Polamalu did, which Brett Coleman compared him to Troy Polamalu a while back. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that comparison rules. That's a good comparison. Even if you don't want to give them the talent level, which, I'm not going to object to somebody being like, let's slow your roll here. The way that they play is very similar. The freelancing is pretty similar. Like Troy Polamalu was like, you know what? If I just kind of blitz here and just kind of leave my cover 4 assignment, there's just going to be a hole. It'll be fine. It'll work out. And he was right. and Harrison Smith would do the same thing. Like he saw like, hey, this running back is kind of walked up because our AA look is giving them fits. So this running back is kind of getting nervous. So he's walking up in pass protection. Yeah. That's my assignment. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to blitz and I'm going to go unblocked and he gets the sack. Right. And that's who he is. So he's crazy smart. He's still a good athlete. He used to be kind of like a super athlete. He's still a good athlete. He's not good in man coverage. It's like the one thing, but the way that he runs the back end of that defense, the way he runs the front end of that defense sometimes has been really important for the way that defense functions. He's no longer the best safety in the NFL, but he didn't get his due when he was, which is pretty unfortunate. But he was up there with like Eric Weddle and Eric Berry, right? In terms of in that conversation, right after Polamalu and Reed were declining. Smith deserved to be in that conversation in a bigger role.
Well, you're lucky that Nick Collins had what happened to him because Nick Collins was coming,
of course,
right around that time. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. All right. Well, we already kind of did Eric Kendricks, so I'll skip that. But last one, we're gonna end with CJ Ham. Reliable.
Kind of overrated. He's good, but like Vikings fans are just crazy. Like if you've got like an all grit guy, Vikings fans are just going to go like, what? Like it's got to be the same way Packers are about, Kuhn, right? Like good, but relax. So reliable.
There's got to be some kind of mystical energy surrounding fullbacks. Because it is the most consistent thing among NFL fans, like from all 32 teams. If you have just a somewhat relevant fullback, they are like a top 5 fan favorite.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
It's crazy.
Part of it's also like you get to be a football guy and it's like, my favorite guy is the guy who never touches the ball. He's a blocker. He doesn't get appreciated, but I know football. So that's part of it, right? But also it's like, what's the most football position on the planet? It's fullback.
Yep.
So that's like part of it too. CJ Ham is a good fullback. I think PFF ranked him second last year, which is the highest PFF has ever ranked him. But he's overrated by fans, which is fine. Like, what's the net impact of that people talk about the fullback more? Fine, good, let's do that. athletic. So he's not a good athlete, but he's a better athlete than you'd think.
Mm-hmm.
So
it was a running back coming out, right?
Yeah, he's running back at Augustana. He set some Augustana records, which you expect, given that he made it.
It's
the
Augustana.
NFL. Yeah, in Augustana. How many NFL players did they produce?
Right.
But yeah, he's a pretty good athlete. I think he outdoes his combine, or I guess you should say pro day numbers, in terms of his ability to kind of move. He has like explosive plays, but I mean, if I'm being honest, the result of the fact that no one's covering the fullback out of the backfield and you got like 30 yards of running room. So I don't want to like overdo it, but he's like a better athlete than you'd think for a fullback. He's no, Kyle Juszczyk. He's no, Kari Blasingame.
I was going to ask CJ Ham or Kari Blasingame.
Blasingame 100%. That was my dude.
You wanted him to keep Blasingame and let him go?
I was. Yeah. You know how I pick a random skill position player to fall in love with? Blasingame was it that year. And they put him on the practice squad, which I totally expected, right?
And then
because they always, and then they got sniped, and I was like, well, the Tennessee Titans are going to make the playoffs, and they did because of Blasingame, obviously.
Because of Kari Blasingame,
obviously.
Well, this is the second deep dive in a row that I've had on my running back screen, a relevant fullback alert.
If I was going to pick the best blocking fullback of the last 5 years, I think I'd pick Anthony Sherman. So I wouldn't say, right, that CJ Ham is up there, but Ham has become more relevant than Sherman.
Man, the Patrick Ricard slander has entered the chat.
Look, man, Patrick Ricard's good, but he's had a couple of down years here and there.
And he's a defensive tackle.
So who's the other defensive tackle? Nikita Whitlock.
Oh boy. When was that?
That was a couple of years ago, man.
I guess
he's like this insanely strong 5'8" dude. They're like, I don't know what to do there. Are you a defensive tackle? Are you I don't know.
I think I remember seeing him in Madden. All right. I'm glad we could have ended this on some fullback slander. That was perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. That was a blast. Great insight as always. Follow Arif at Arif Hasan, NFL. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, that's good. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to The Athletic. Click on one of my articles first so I get credit.
There you
go. But yeah, Arif Hasan NFL, ARIF HASAN NFL.
Awesome, man. Thanks for taking the time to come on.
Yeah, this was fun.